The wind howled like a dying animal against the cabin walls, and Adelaide Emerson knew she had perhaps 3 more hours before the cold claimed her completely. She sat wrapped in every blanket she owned, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air, watching frost creep across the inside of her windows like skeletal fingers reaching toward her. The wood had run out yesterday. The food, 2 days before that. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 6 months now, killed in a ranching accident that left her alone on this isolated homestead, 20 miles north of Fort Davis, Texas. And she had tried so hard to survive. But winter had come early and fierce in December of 1883, and she was losing the fight. Her fingers had gone numb hours ago. She could barely feel her toes. Adelaide was 24 years old, and she was going to die in this cabin where she had once been happy, where she and Thomas had made plans for children and cattle and a future that would never come. The blizzard had been raging for 3 days now, unprecedented for West Texas, a freak storm that had buried everything under 2 feet of snow and showed no signs of stopping. She had tried to reach the main road yesterday, but the cold had driven her back within minutes. There was no one coming. No one even knew she was out here struggling. She thought about Thomas, about his kind smile and the way he used to hold her close at night. She thought about her parents back in Tennessee, who had warned her against marrying a rancher and moving west. She thought about all the things she would never do, never see, never experience. Her eyes were growing heavy. The cold did not hurt anymore. That was a bad sign, she knew. When you stopped feeling cold, it meant the end was near. Adelaide let her eyes close. She said a prayer, asking God to forgive her for not being strong enough, for giving up. She asked him to tell Thomas she had tried. She asked for it to be quick. Then she heard it, so faint at first that she thought it was part of a dream or perhaps death itself announcing its arrival. Hoofbeats. Muffled by snow, but definitely hoofbeats, and a voice, deep and male, calling out. Adelaide forced her eyes open. It took all her strength to stand, the blankets falling from her shoulders. She stumbled to the window and scraped at the frost with fingers that barely worked. Through the gap she created, she saw him. A man on horseback, bundled in a heavy coat and hat, leading another horse behind him. He was riding straight toward her cabin through the blinding snow. She tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper. She moved to the door, fumbling with the latch with clumsy hands. It took 3 tries to get it open. When she finally did, the wind nearly knocked her over. The man had dismounted and was already at her porch steps. "Madam, are you Adelaide Emerson?" he shouted over the wind. His face was partially covered by a scarf, but she could see dark eyes beneath the brim of his hat. She nodded, unable to form words. He did not waste time with further questions. He took in the situation with a single glance, seeing her pale face, her shaking body, the darkness of the cabin behind her. "How long has your fire been out?" "Since yesterday morning," she managed to say, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely speak. "Is there anyone else here?" "No. Just me." He looked back at the storm, then at her again. His eyes were decisive. "You will die if you stay here. Come with me." Adelaide knew he was right, but fear paralyzed her for a moment. She did not know this man. In the normal world, you did not just ride off with strangers. But this was not the normal world. This was survival. This was life or death. "I am Xavier Olson," he said, as if reading her hesitation. "I have a ranch 15 miles south of here. Well, closer to 10 now because I rode up looking for you specifically. Your husband bought cattle from me last spring. When this storm hit, I remembered he had mentioned a wife living up here, figured you might be in trouble." Thomas had mentioned Xavier. She remembered now. A rancher, a good man, Thomas had said, someone you could trust. "I cannot feel my hands," she whispered. Xavier did not hesitate. He stepped forward, scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and carried her toward the horses. "We need to move fast. Can you ride?" "I do not know." "Then you are riding with me." He lifted her onto his horse, a massive bay gelding, then swung up behind her. He wrapped his heavy coat around them both, pulling her back against his chest. The warmth of his body was shocking after hours of cold, and she gasped. "Hold on to the saddle horn," he instructed. "I have got you, but you need to help me keep you upright. Can you do that?" Adelaide gripped the horn with what little strength she had. "Yes." Xavier urged the horse forward, the second horse following on a lead rope. Adelaide expected him to struggle with the snow, but Xavier seemed to know exactly where he was going. He kept the horses moving at a steady pace, not too fast to risk injury, not too slow to prolong their exposure to the cold. "Talk to me," Xavier said after a few minutes. "Tell me about yourself." "Anything. I need to know you are staying conscious." "I am from Tennessee," Adelaide said, her words slurred. "Came here 2 years ago when I married Thomas." "What part of Tennessee?" "Nashville. My father was a banker. Long way from banking country." His voice was steady, calm, and somehow reassuring. "What made you fall for a Texas rancher?" He had kind eyes. The words came out before she could stop them, and he made me laugh. He said life out here was hard but honest. I wanted honest. "Thomas was a good man," Xavier said. "I was sorry to hear about his passing. Accident with a horse, was it not?" "Yes." The memory still hurt. "The horse spooked. Thomas fell, broke his neck. He died before I could even reach him. I am sorry." They rode in silence for a while. Adelaide could feel Xavier's arms around her, holding her secure, and his chest rising and falling with each breath. She should have felt awkward, being this close to a strange man, but she was too cold and too tired to care about propriety. He was keeping her alive. That was all that mattered. "Why did you come looking for me?" she asked. "Because I knew you were up here alone, and I knew what this storm could do. You risked your life. I have been through worse." His tone suggested he did not want to discuss it further. Adelaide's eyes kept trying to close. The rhythm of the horse, the warmth of Xavier's body, it was all pulling her toward sleep. "No," Xavier said sharply, jostling her slightly. "Stay awake, Adelaide. Talk to me more. Tell me about Nashville. What was it like?" She forced herself to focus. "Green. Everything was so green. And there were trees everywhere. When I first came here, I could not believe how empty the land looked. No trees for miles. Do you miss it?" "Sometimes. But I loved Thomas. That made it home." And now the question hung in the air. Adelaide did not have an answer. Without Thomas, the cabin had stopped feeling like home. It had become just a place, and then a prison, and finally a tomb. "I do not know what I am now," she admitted. "Right now, you are someone who is surviving," Xavier said. "That is enough." The storm continued to rage around them, but Xavier never faltered. He kept them moving, adjusting their direction occasionally, navigating by instincts Adelaide could not fathom. She had no idea how he could tell where they were going. Everything looked the same to her: white snow, gray sky, endless cold. But gradually she began to notice differences. A rock formation here, a cluster of stubborn trees there. Xavier knew this land. He had probably ridden every inch of it. The knowledge was reassuring. How much farther? She asked. Another hour, maybe a bit more, an hour. She could survive another hour. She had to. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, trying to keep herself alert. "It is called the Circle. I have about 2,000 acres, mostly cattle, some horses. I run it with my foreman Jake and about 8 other hands. We have been building it up for 6 years now." 6 years. You must have started young." "I was 22 when I bought the land. I am 28 now, only 4 years older than her." For some reason that surprised her. His competence, his calm authority made him seem older. "Do you have family?" she asked. "Not anymore. My parents died of fever when I was 19. I had a younger sister, but she died with them. It was just me after that. I am sorry. Long time ago now." But she could hear the old pain in his voice. They fell silent again. Adelaide focused on staying conscious, on holding onto the saddle horn, on breathing. The cold seemed less intense than before, or maybe she was just getting used to it, or maybe she was getting worse. She could not tell anymore. "Xavier," she said quietly. "Yeah, thank you for coming for me. Thank Tom. He talked about you enough that I felt like I knew you," kept going on about his pretty wife from Tennessee who was tougher than she looked. Guess he was right about that. Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. Thomas had said that about her. She wished she could have told him he was wrong. She was not tough. If she was tough, she would not have nearly frozen to death in her own cabin. "You are allowed to cry," Xavier said, somehow sensing her emotion. "No shame in it. If I start, I might not stop." "Then save it for later when you are warm and safe." Warm and safe. The words sounded like a fairy tale, but then through the snow she saw lights, faint at first then growing stronger, buildings. A barn, a house. The Circle O. Xavier urged the horses faster now that they had a clear destination. They rode into a yard where a man in a heavy coat came running out of the barn. "Boss, you found her. Get fresh water boiling, Jake, and tell Maria we need warm blankets and hot food. Move." Jake ran toward the house as Xavier dismounted, then carefully lifted Adelaide down. Her legs would not support her weight and she collapsed against him. He caught her easily, lifting her into his arms again. "I've got you," he said. "You are safe now." He carried her toward the house, shouldering the door open. The warmth hit Adelaide like a physical force and she gasped. Inside, a fireplace roared with heat, and a Mexican woman in her 50s was already spreading blankets near the fire. "Dios mío," the woman breathed when she saw Adelaide. "The poor child. Bring her here, Señor Xavier." Xavier laid Adelaide on the blankets near the fire. Maria began removing Adelaide's frozen outer layers with gentle efficiency while Xavier pulled off his own coat and gloves. "Her hands and feet," Maria said, examining Adelaide. "They are very cold. We must warm them slowly." "I know. Get the water ready, not too hot." Xavier knelt beside Adelaide as Maria bustled away. He took Adelaide's hands in his own, rubbing them gently. "This is going to hurt when the feeling comes back. I am sorry for that." Adelaide nodded. She was shaking again now, violent tremors that she could not control. Xavier wrapped another blanket around her shoulders. "The shaking is good," he said. "It means your body is trying to warm itself up." Maria returned with a basin of warm water. For her hands first, then her feet. They worked together, Xavier and Maria, gently placing Adelaide's hands in the water. The sensation was excruciating. Adelaide bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears streamed down her face anyway. "I know," Xavier said softly. "I know it hurts, but you have to get the circulation back. Just breathe through it." Adelaide focused on breathing, in and out, in and out. Slowly the pain began to subside into a fierce tingling. Her fingers were turning pink again. That was good, she thought. Pink was better than white. They repeated the process with her feet. More pain, more tears, but Xavier stayed beside her the whole time, his presence steady and reassuring. Maria brought hot broth, and Xavier helped Adelaide drink it in small sips. The warmth spread through her chest, chasing away some of the deep cold that had settled into her bones. "You are going to be all right," Xavier said. "No frostbite that I can see. You are lucky." "Lucky," Adelaide repeated with a weak laugh. "I almost died. But you did not. That is the part that matters." Maria brought more food, a thick stew with vegetables and beef. Adelaide ate slowly, her body desperate for the nourishment. Xavier sat back on his heels, watching her with those dark eyes. "You can stay here as long as you need to," he said. "We have a spare room. Maria will get it ready for you. Once the storm passes and you have your strength back, we will figure out what comes next." "I have nothing," Adelaide said quietly. "Everything I own is in that cabin, and I could not even bring any of it with me. Things can be replaced. You cannot." She looked at him, this stranger who had risked his life to save hers, who was now offering her shelter without asking for anything in return. In the firelight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He had a strong face, weathered by sun and wind, with a straight nose and a firm jaw. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. His eyes were brown, deep and serious. There was something solid about him, something utterly dependable. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do all this for someone you do not even know?" Xavier was quiet for a moment. "Because Tom would have done the same for me if our positions were reversed, and because it is the right thing to do. Out here, we look after each other. That is how we survive," Maria returned. "The room, it is ready. Come, child, you need to rest." Adelaide tried to stand, but her legs were still shaky. Xavier helped her up, supporting her weight as they walked down a hallway to a small bedroom. The bed was piled with quilts, and a fire had been lit in a small stove in the corner. It was the most beautiful sight Adelaide had ever seen. "Sleep," Xavier said. "Maria will check on you. If you need anything, just call out. I will be here." Adelaide nodded, too exhausted to form words. Maria helped her into the bed, and the moment her head touched the pillow, she was asleep. She slept for 14 hours straight, waking only when Maria brought water and more food. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the house, everything was warm and safe. Adelaide ate, used the chamber pot Maria provided, and fell back asleep. Her body was recovering from the ordeal, demanding rest to heal. When she finally woke properly, sunlight was streaming through the window. The storm had passed. Adelaide sat up slowly, testing her body. She was sore and stiff, but her hands and feet were working properly. No lasting damage. She had survived. There was a dress laid out on a chair near the bed, along with undergarments and stockings. They would be Maria's clothes, Adelaide realized. She dressed slowly, grateful for the kindness. Her own clothes had been so threadbare, patched and mended until there was barely original fabric left. Adelaide made her way out of the bedroom, following the sound of voices. She found Xavier and Maria in the kitchen, sitting at a large wooden table. They looked up when she entered. "You are awake," Maria said with a smile. "Come, sit. I will get you breakfast." "Please, you have already done so much," Adelaide protested. "Nonsense. Sit." Adelaide sat, and Maria placed a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits in front of her. Real food, more than she had eaten in weeks. She tried not to eat too quickly, but it was difficult. Xavier watched her, and she wondered what he was thinking. She must look terrible, thin and pale, wearing borrowed clothes. Not at all like the capable ranch wife Thomas had bragged about. "The storm is over," Xavier said. "But it will be a few days before the snow melts enough for easy travel. You are welcome to stay here until then. Longer if you need to." "I cannot impose on your hospitality indefinitely," Adelaide said. "It is not an imposition." His tone was matter of fact. "You have nowhere else to go right now. The question is, what do you want to do after the snow clears?" Adelaide had been trying not to think about that. "I suppose I should go back to the cabin, try to salvage what I can, and then, I do not know." She looked down at her plate. "I cannot stay there alone. I nearly died. Another storm like that, or even just a bad cold spell, and I would not survive. But I have no money to go anywhere else. Thomas left debts. The cattle were sold to pay them off. The cabin is all I have left, and it is not worth much." "Do you want to go back to Tennessee?" did she? Adelaide considered the question. Her parents were still there, but they had never approved of her marriage. Going back would mean admitting they had been right, that her adventure in Texas had been a mistake. It would mean living in their house again, under their rules, probably until they arranged a suitable marriage for her with some banker's son. "No," she said firmly. "I do not want to go back. Then you need to figure out how to stay." Xavier leaned back in his chair. "Do you have any skills?" "Can you cook, so keep books?" "I can do all those things. Thomas taught me about ranching too. I can ride, tend cattle, help with branding. I am not afraid of hard work." "That is good, because I might have a proposition for you." Adelaide looked up, meeting his eyes. "I need a housekeeper," Xavier said. "Maria has been filling in, but she is supposed to be the cook for the ranch hands, not running my house too. She has been doing both for 2 years now, and it is too much. The job would include cooking for me, keeping the house clean, mending clothes, that sort of thing. Room and board included, plus wages. Not much, but enough to save some money. You could stay in the room you have been sleeping in." It was a generous offer, almost too generous. Adelaide studied Xavier's face, looking for ulterior motives, but she saw only sincerity. "Why would you offer me this?" she asked carefully. "Because I need help and you need a job. It is practical." He paused. "If you are worried about propriety, Maria lives here in the house too, in the room off the kitchen. Jake and the other hands are in the bunkhouse. It would all be proper." "I was not worried about that," Adelaide lied. She had been a little. A widow living in the house of a bachelor rancher could cause talk. "So what do you say?" Adelaide thought about her options. She could try to make it alone in the cabin, but that had nearly killed her. She could go back to Tennessee and surrender her independence. Or she could accept Xavier's offer and build a new life here. "Yes," she said. "I accept, thank you." Xavier nodded, looking satisfied. "Good. We will go to your cabin once the snow melts a bit, get your belongings. In the meantime, Maria can show you around the house and explain what needs doing." And just like that, Adelaide's life shifted onto a new path. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Maria showed Adelaide every corner of the house, explaining Xavier's preferences and routines. He was, Adelaide learned, a man of simple tastes but exacting standards. He wanted his meals on time, his clothes clean and mended, and his house organized. But he was not demanding or unkind. He said please and thank you, and he treated both Maria and Adelaide with respect. The house itself was surprisingly comfortable. Xavier had built it 3 years earlier, and while it was not fancy, it was well constructed and thoughtfully designed. There was a main living area with the large fireplace, the kitchen with a good stove, 3 bedrooms, and even a small bathing room with a copper tub. For a bachelor rancher, Xavier lived very well. Adelaide fell into the rhythm of the household quickly. She rose early to start the breakfast, served Xavier and the ranch hands who came to the house to eat, cleaned up, spent the day on various household tasks, and prepared dinner in the evening. It was hard work, but she had done it before in her own cabin. And here, she had Maria's company and help, which made everything easier. Xavier was gone most days, out working with the cattle or mending fences or handling the countless other tasks that running a ranch required. But in the evenings, he would return, clean up, and join Adelaide for dinner. Maria ate with the ranch hands in the bunkhouse most nights, saying they needed her mothering, which left Adelaide and Xavier alone at the table. At first, they ate in silence, neither quite sure what to say to the other. But gradually, they began to talk. Xavier asked about Adelaide's life in Tennessee, and she told him stories about growing up in a city, about her strict father and gentle mother, about the social expectations she had chafed against. In turn, Xavier told her about his childhood on a farm in Missouri, about coming to Texas after his family died, about building the circle from nothing. "Why Texas?" Adelaide asked one evening. "You could have gone anywhere." "Texas was far enough away from the memories," Xavier said. "And the land was cheap. I could afford to take a chance here. Back in Missouri, I would have been just another hired hand on someone else's farm for the rest of my life. Do you ever regret it, sometimes when a winter like this one hits?" He gave her a slight smile, but mostly no. "I like the freedom. I like working for myself, building something that is mine. It is hard, but it is honest. You said you wanted honest, right?" "I did. I do." Adelaide looked down at her plate. "Thomas used to say the same thing, that the work was hard but honest. Do you want to talk about him?" Xavier asked gently. Adelaide had been avoiding thinking about Thomas too much, afraid the grief would overwhelm her. But now, in the safety of Xavier's kitchen, she found the words coming. "He was good to me," she said, "patient when I struggled to adjust to ranch life. He never made me feel foolish for not knowing things, and he really tried to make me happy. He built me a little garden, even though the soil was terrible. He brought me books from town. He told me I was beautiful even when I was covered in dirt and sweat. Sounds like you loved him." "I did. Maybe not at first, but I grew to love him deeply, which is why losing him hurt so much. And the cabin. Why did you stay there alone after he died?" "Pride, I think," Adelaide admitted. "I did not want to give up. Thomas had worked so hard to build that life for us. Leaving felt like betraying him, and I had nowhere else to go. I wrote to my parents, but they said I made my choice when I married against their wishes. They were not going to help me." Xavier's expression darkened. "That is cruel." "They are not cruel people, just rigid. They believe in consequences. Consequences should not include letting your daughter freeze to death." Adelaide felt a rush of warmth at his indignation on her behalf. "Well, I did not freeze to death. You saved me." "Barely," Xavier said, and she could hear the worry that had been hiding under his calm exterior. "You were so close, Adelaide. When I saw you in that doorway, I thought I was too late. But you were not. I am here. I am alive." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them. Not attraction, not yet, but connection. Recognition. Two people who had both lost family, both survived hardship, both understood what it meant to fight for a life in this unforgiving land. After a week, the snow had melted enough for travel. Xavier hitched up a wagon and took Adelaide to her cabin. The journey that had taken hours in the blizzard took less than 2 in clear weather. When they arrived, Adelaide was shocked by how small and isolated the cabin looked. Had she really lived here alone for 6 months? Inside, everything was frozen. Her meager possessions were covered in frost. Xavier helped her pack what was worth taking: a few clothes, a quilt her grandmother had made, Thomas's good pocket watch, the Bible her mother had given her when she married, a few cooking implements. It all fit in 2 small crates. "Is that everything?" Xavier asked. Adelaide looked around the cabin one more time. She had been happy here once when Thomas was alive, but that happiness was gone now, and all that remained were ghosts and cold. "Yes," she said, "that is everything." They loaded the crates into the wagon. As Xavier drove away, Adelaide did not look back. That chapter of her life was closed. Winter gradually gave way to early spring. Adelaide settled fully into her role at the Circle O, and the house began to feel like home. She learned the personalities of the ranch hands. Jake, the serious foreman who had worked with Xavier from the beginning. Billy, the young joker who was always playing pranks. Sam, the quiet cowboy who could gentle any horse. And the others, each with their own stories and quirks. She also learned more about Xavier. He was a fair boss, working alongside his men rather than simply giving orders. He was generous with wages but expected hard work in return. He did not drink to excess, did not gamble, and treated women with unfailing courtesy. The ranch hands respected him, and Adelaide began to understand why. She also began to notice other things. The way Xavier's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The way he always hung his hat on the same peg by the door. The way he read at night, usually books about ranching or history, sometimes falling asleep in his chair with the book still in his lap. The way he was patient with the younger hands, teaching them skills rather than criticizing their mistakes. Adelaide told herself she was simply observing her employer, learning his habits to better serve him. But that was not entirely true, and she knew it. One evening in March, Xavier came home later than usual, and Adelaide noticed he was favoring his left side. What happened? She asked, serving him the dinner she had kept warm. Just a bruise. One of the calves did not appreciate being branded. Let me see. Adelaide, it is fine. Xavier Olson, let me see that bruise. He blinked at her commanding tone, then a slow smile spread across his face. Yes, madam. He unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a spectacular bruise spreading across his ribcage. Adelaide gasped. That is not just a bruise. You could have cracked ribs. They are not cracked. Trust me, I know what cracked ribs feel like. You need a poultice. Sit down. Adelaide fetched supplies and made a poultice of herbs and warm water. She tried to ignore how close she was standing to him, tried not to notice the warmth of his skin under her hands as she applied the remedy. Xavier sat very still, watching her face as she worked. You are good at this, he said quietly. I had to learn. Thomas was always getting injured. Ranching is dangerous work. It is. He caught her hand gently as she reached for more cloth. Adelaide. She looked up, and their faces were very close. Her heart began to beat faster. Thank you, Xavier said, for taking care of me. It is my job, she said, but her voice came out breathier than she intended. Is that all it is? The question hung in the air between them. Adelaide knew what he was really asking. Was this just an employer and employee? Or had something more developed between them over these months of living under the same roof, sharing meals and conversation and small moments of daily life? I do not know, she admitted. What do you want it to be? I do not know either, Xavier said, but he had not released her hand. It has only been 8 months since Thomas died. I do not want to dishonor his memory or make you feel pressured. You could never make me feel pressured. Adelaide looked down at their joined hands. You saved my life, Xavier. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You have been nothing but kind to me. I would be lying if I said I had not noticed you as more than just my employer. But I do not know if what I feel is genuine or just gratitude, and I do not know if I am ready for something new. Thomas was my husband. I loved him. Moving on feels like betrayal. Xavier squeezed her hand gently, then released it. Then we will not move on, not until you are ready. I can wait, Adelaide. I am a patient man. But what if I am never ready? Then I will have had the pleasure of your company and your friendship, and that will be enough. He meant it. Adelaide could see the sincerity in his eyes. Here was a man who would not push, would not demand, would simply wait until she was ready, if she ever was. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For understanding, Xavier smiled. Finish the poultice. These ribs hurt like hell. Adelaide laughed, and the tension broke. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of what might be, even if the timing was not yet right. Spring turned into summer. The ranch work intensified with calving season, and then the summer roundup. Xavier was gone for days at a time, riding the range with his men. Adelaide missed him more than she wanted to admit, found herself watching the horizon for his return, felt her heart lift when she finally saw him riding in. She spent her time maintaining the house, helping Maria with the cooking, and occasionally riding out to bring supplies to the men on the range. Jake always accompanied her on those trips, proper and protective. But Adelaide cherished the freedom of being on horseback again, feeling the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. On one such trip in June, they encountered trouble. A group of men Adelaide did not recognize were cutting across Circle O land, driving a small herd of cattle that definitely belonged to Xavier. "Rustlers," Jake said grimly. "Stay back, Mrs. Emerson." But there were 5 of them and only one of Jake. Adelaide knew basic arithmetic. They were outnumbered. "I am getting Xavier," she said. "No, you need to stay safe. And you need help. Where is the crew?" "North pasture, about 3 miles. Adelaide wheeled her horse around and rode hard. She found Xavier and the others working a herd, and she did not waste time with explanations. Rustlers, 5 of them, with Jake west boundary. Xavier did not hesitate. He grabbed 4 men and rode out at a gallop, Adelaide keeping pace. When they reached the west boundary, the rustlers were still there, arguing with Jake. One had a gun drawn. Xavier and his men surrounded them quickly, weapons ready. "Those are my cattle," Xavier said, his voice cold and hard in a way Adelaide had never heard before. "And you are on my land." The rustlers looked at each other, calculating odds, but they were outgunned now and they knew it. "We found them wandering," one said, "with my brand on them. Try again." The standoff lasted several tense seconds. Then the rustlers' leader spat on the ground. "Keep your damn cattle." They rode off, and Xavier's men drove the cattle back toward the main herd. Xavier dismounted and checked Jake over. "You all right?" "Yeah, boss. Thanks to Mrs. Emerson. She saved my hide." Xavier turned to Adelaide, and she saw worry in his eyes. "You could have been hurt riding that hard." "But I was not, and Jake needed help." "She is right, boss," Jake said. "I would have been in real trouble if she had not fetched you." Xavier looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded. "Thank you." That evening, after everyone had settled down from the excitement, Xavier found Adelaide alone in the kitchen. "That was brave," he said. "What you did today. It was necessary. Still brave." He paused. "You are not what I expected, Adelaide Emerson." "What did you expect?" "I do not know." "Someone more fragile, maybe. Someone who needed constant protecting. But you are strong, stronger than you give yourself credit for. I did not feel strong when you found me freezing in that cabin. But you had survived 6 months alone. You only faltered at the very end when the storm was too much for anyone to handle alone. That is not weakness. That is human." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. She had been so ashamed of her near-death experience, feeling like she had failed. But Xavier was right. She had survived 6 months. "That counted for something. Thank you," she said. "I needed to hear that." Xavier stepped closer. "I know I said I would wait, and I will, but I want you to know something, Adelaide. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you in that doorway, so stubborn and determined to survive. So when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here." He left before she could respond, but his words echoed in her mind. "I am falling in love with you." Adelaide lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, examining her feelings. When she thought about Thomas now, the grief was softer, more bittersweet than sharp. She would always love him, always treasure what they had shared, but he was gone and she was still alive. And when she thought about Xavier, she felt something warm and bright blooming in her chest. She loved his steadiness, his integrity, his quiet strength. She loved the way he treated her as an equal, valued her opinions, trusted her capabilities. She loved his rare smiles and the way he listened when she talked, and the way he made her feel safe. She was falling in love with him too. Maybe she had been for months. She had just been too afraid to admit it. The next morning, Adelaide woke with a sense of clarity. She helped Maria with breakfast, served the ranch hands, and waited for Xavier to finish his morning meal. As he stood to leave, she caught his arm. "Can we talk? Tonight after dinner, of course. The day passed slowly. Adelaide cleaned the house, tried to focus on her tasks, but her mind kept wandering to the conversation ahead. What if she was making a mistake? What if it was too soon? What if people judged her for moving on so quickly from her husband's death? But then she remembered the cold of that cabin, the certainty that she was going to die. She had been given a second chance at life. She did not want to waste it being afraid. That evening, after Maria had gone to the bunkhouse and the ranch hands had settled in for the night, Adelaide and Xavier sat on the porch. The summer night was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "You wanted to talk," Xavier said. "Yes." Adelaide took a breath. "I have been thinking about what you said yesterday about falling in love with me. Adelaide, you do not have to. Let me finish." She turned to face him. "I have been thinking about Thomas too, about what he would want for me. And I know, without any doubt, that he would want me to be happy. He would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone mourning him. He loved me enough to want me to love again. That is generous of you to say. It is the truth. And the truth is also that I am falling in love with you too, Xavier. Maybe it is gratitude mixed with affection, I do not know, but it feels real, it feels right, and I am tired of being afraid to find out." Xavier's eyes searched her face. "Are you sure?" "No," Adelaide admitted. "I am terrified. But I think that is normal. Love is always a risk, is it not?" "It is," Xavier said softly. He reached out and took her hand. "So what do you want to do about it?" "I want to see where this goes. I want to court properly, slowly, give ourselves time to be sure. And if it feels right, if we both still want it in a few months, then maybe we could talk about something more permanent. I can do that." Xavier lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Adelaide Emerson, may I court you?" "Yes," she said, smiling through sudden tears. "Yes, you may." They sat on that porch for hours, talking and laughing, still holding hands as the stars wheeled overhead. And for the first time since Thomas's death, Adelaide felt truly happy. The courtship was everything Adelaide could have hoped for. Xavier was attentive without being overbearing, romantic without being excessive. He brought her wildflowers from the range. He took her riding to beautiful spots on the ranch, showing her hidden springs and dramatic rock formations. He told her about his dreams for the future, for expanding the ranch, maybe raising horses alongside the cattle. And he kissed her for the first time in July, standing in the barn after they had finished grooming the horses together. It was tentative at first, testing, but when Adelaide responded eagerly, the kiss deepened into something passionate and real. "I have wanted to do that for months," Xavier admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "I wish you had done it sooner," Adelaide teased. "I was trying to be a gentleman." "You are a gentleman, but you are also the man I love, and I like kissing you." They smiled at each other like fools, and Adelaide felt young and giddy in a way she never had before. Her marriage to Thomas had been built on friendship and respect, growing into love over time. But with Xavier, the passion was there from the beginning, mixed with the friendship and respect. It was intoxicating. In August, Xavier asked Adelaide to marry him. They were sitting by the creek that ran through the southern part of the ranch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I know we said we would wait," Xavier began, "but I do not want to wait anymore. I want you to be my wife, Adelaide. I want to build a life with you, a real life, children if we are blessed, growing old together, all of it." "Yes," Adelaide said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Xavier pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I swear it, you already do." They were married in September of 1884 in Fort Davis, in a simple ceremony at the church with Maria and Jake, and the ranch hands as witnesses. Adelaide wore a new dress that Xavier had bought for her in town, pale blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Xavier wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and delighted all at once. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Xavier kissed Adelaide with such tenderness that several people in the small congregation sighed. And Adelaide knew, beyond any doubt, that she had made the right choice. Their wedding night was both awkward and beautiful, as first nights often are. Xavier was patient and gentle, making sure Adelaide felt comfortable and cherished. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like a completion, like two puzzle pieces finally finding their fit. Afterward, lying in Xavier's arms in the bed that was now theirs, Adelaide felt at peace. She had loved Thomas, and she always would. But Xavier was her future, and she was ready to embrace it. Life settled into a new rhythm. Adelaide was no longer just the housekeeper but the lady of the ranch, Xavier's partner in every sense. She helped with the books, managing the finances with skills she had learned from her banker father. She worked alongside the men during roundup, proving she could handle herself in the saddle. She hosted dinners for neighboring ranchers, building relationships that would help the circle prosper. And she loved Xavier more every day. Loved waking up next to him, loved the way he always kissed her goodbye before heading out to work, loved their evenings together talking about the day. It was not always easy. They had disagreements, like any couple. But they learned to talk through their problems, to compromise, to choose their battles. In the spring of 1885, Adelaide realized she was pregnant. She told Xavier one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "A baby," Xavier said, his voice full of wonder. "We are having a baby. Yes, in late autumn, the doctor thinks." Xavier let out a whoop of joy and picked Adelaide up, spinning her around. Then he quickly set her down. "Sorry, should I not have done that? I do not want to hurt the baby," Adelaide laughed. "The baby is fine, I am fine. But you might want to calm down before you break something." Xavier could not stop smiling. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child," he said reverently. "Adelaide, you have made me so happy." "We made this child together," Adelaide reminded him. "And we will raise this child together. I am just as happy as you are." The pregnancy was not easy. Adelaide suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and the summer heat made her swollen and uncomfortable. But Xavier was attentive and supportive, taking on extra household tasks and making sure Adelaide rested enough. Maria clucked over her like a mother hen, preparing special meals and herbal teas to ease her symptoms. In November of 1885, Adelaide went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Xavier paced outside the bedroom, forbidden by Maria and the midwife from entering. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, a baby's cry. Maria opened the door, tears on her cheeks. "A boy, Señor Xavier." "You have a son." Xavier rushed into the room. Adelaide lay exhausted on the bed, her hair damp with sweat, but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," Adelaide said softly. Xavier sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the infant. He had dark hair like Xavier's and was screaming with impressive lung power. Xavier felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Adelaide." "What should we name him?" Adelaide asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Xavier knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Henry Olson. To honor your first husband, who would have been glad to know you are happy and loved." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Henry. Yes, that is perfect." Little Thomas was a healthy, loud baby who demanded attention at all hours. Adelaide was exhausted but glowing with happiness. Xavier was besotted with his son, often just standing over the cradle watching him sleep, marveling that he had helped create this tiny person. The ranch continued to prosper. Xavier made smart decisions about breeding and land use, and the Circle O's reputation for quality cattle grew. They bought adjoining land, expanding their holdings. They hired more hands. Xavier even began breeding horses as he had dreamed, starting with 3 good mares and a solid stallion. 2 years after Thomas was born, Adelaide had their second child, a daughter they named Rose Marie. She had Adelaide's coloring with light hair and blue-green eyes. Xavier declared her the most beautiful baby ever born, which made Adelaide laugh since he had said the exact same thing about Thomas. Life was busy and chaotic with 2 young children and a ranch to run, but it was good. Adelaide had never been happier. She had a husband who loved her, children who filled her days with joy, work that challenged and fulfilled her, and a home that was truly hers. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Adelaide would sit on the porch with Xavier, both of them rocking gently in the chairs he had built. They would talk about the day, make plans for the future, or simply sit in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. "Do you ever think about that blizzard?" Xavier asked one such evening. "The day I found you, sometimes," Adelaide admitted. "It seems like another lifetime ago now." "I was so scared I was too late," Xavier confessed. "When I saw you collapse in the doorway, I thought my heart would stop. But you were not too late. You saved me. And look at everything that came from that moment. Our marriage, our children, all of this. You did not just save my life that day, Xavier. You gave me a whole new life." Xavier reached over and took her hand. "You gave me a new life, too. Before you, the ranch was just work. It was something to occupy my time, to prove I could make something of myself. But it was not really living. You made it a home. You made it a life worth living." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "We made it together." "Together," Xavier agreed. As the years passed, the Olson family continued to grow and thrive. They had 2 more children, a son named William in 1889 and another daughter, Catherine, in 1891. The ranch house was expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Xavier adding more bedrooms and even a proper dining room. Thomas, the eldest, grew into a responsible boy who loved working with the cattle like his father. Rose was bright and curious, always reading and asking questions. William was the adventurous one, constantly getting into trouble. And Catherine was the baby, sweet and charming, with her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Adelaide watched her children grow with pride and joy. She taught them to read and write, instilled in them the values of hard work and honesty, and made sure they knew they were deeply loved. Xavier was a wonderful father, patient and playful, firm when necessary but always fair. In 1893, on a warm spring evening, Adelaide and Xavier celebrated their 9th wedding anniversary. The children were spending the night at a neighboring ranch, giving the couple a rare evening alone. 9 years, Adelaide mused as they sat on the porch. "It has gone so quickly." "Best 9 years of my life," Xavier said. "Mine too." Adelaide looked out at the land that had become so familiar to her. "Do you remember what you said to me, that day in the blizzard when you found me?" "Come with me," Xavier quoted. "How could I forget? Those 3 words changed everything." "I was so scared," Adelaide admitted. "Not just of dying, but of trusting a stranger. But something in your eyes made me believe you, made me feel like I could trust you. And were you right to trust me?" Adelaide turned to her husband, this man who had saved her life and then given her a new one. "Yes," she said simply. "I was right." Xavier pulled her close, and they sat watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. A warm breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Everything was peaceful, perfect. "I love you, Adelaide Olson," Xavier said. "I love you too," Adelaide replied. "More than I ever thought possible." As the years continued to roll by, the Circle O became one of the most successful ranches in the region. Xavier's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread far beyond Fort Davis. People came from other states to buy his cattle and horses. The Olson name meant quality and integrity. But despite their financial success, Xavier and Adelaide never forgot their roots. They helped neighboring ranchers who fell on hard times. They donated to the church and the school in Fort Davis. When another harsh winter struck in 1896, Xavier organized rescue efforts for isolated homesteaders, remembering how close Adelaide had come to death in such a storm. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's kind heart. At 18, he began courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Emma. Rose, at 16, was already helping with the ranch books and talking about maybe going east to study at a women's college. William, at 14, was still wild but showing signs of settling down. And Catherine, at 12, was the family's sunshine, always laughing and making everyone around her smile. Adelaide was 44 years old in 1903, and Xavier was 48. They had gray in their hair now, lines on their faces from years of sun and wind and laughter. But they were still deeply in love, still partners in every sense. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Thomas having married Emma and given them 2 beautiful grandchildren already, Adelaide reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come for me that day?" she asked Xavier. "If you had decided the storm was too dangerous, or if you had forgotten I was up there alone?" Xavier was quiet for a moment. "I try not to think about it," he admitted. "Because a world without you in it is not one I want to imagine." "I think about it sometimes," Adelaide said. "Not with regret, but with gratitude. I was given a second chance and I did not waste it. I built a life. I loved deeply. I raised children who will do good in this world. And I spent decades with the man I love. How many people can say that?" "Not enough," Xavier said. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years together. "You know what I think about sometimes? I think about that moment in the blizzard when I said, 'Come with me,' and you chose to trust me. That single decision changed both our lives forever." "It was the easiest decision I ever made," Adelaide said. "Even in my half-frozen state, I knew you were offering me life. Not just survival, but real life, hope, future, love. How could I refuse that?" "Still, it took courage, maybe, or maybe it just took desperation." Adelaide smiled. "But I am glad I said yes. I am glad you found me. I am glad for every single moment we have had together." Xavier raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "So am I, my love. So am I." As the sun set over the Circle O Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Adelaide Olson felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had lived through loss and hardship, through bitter cold and near death. But she had also lived through love and joy, through the laughter of children and the satisfaction of hard work rewarded. She had been a banker's daughter, a rancher's wife, a widow facing death alone in a frozen cabin. And then Xavier had ridden through the snow and offered her a new beginning with 3 simple words, "Come with me." Adelaide had taken his hand, and together they had built something beautiful. A family, a home, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. In the years that followed, the Circle O continued to thrive under the joint stewardship of Xavier and Adelaide, and eventually with Thomas taking on more responsibility. Rose did go east for college, becoming a teacher and returning to Fort Davis to educate the next generation. William eventually settled down and became the ranch foreman after Jake retired. Catherine married a doctor and moved to San Antonio, though she visited often with her own growing family. Xavier and Adelaide grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1909, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, a testament to the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy and the cold of a blizzard. On a quiet evening in 1915, Adelaide sat with Xavier on their porch, both of them wrapped in blankets against the chill of another winter. They were older now, slower, but still together, still in love. "Do you remember," Adelaide said softly, "when you told me that Thomas would have wanted me to be happy?" "I do," Xavier replied. "You were right, and I think he would be proud of the life we have built, proud of our children and the people they have become. Proud that I did not let grief destroy me." "He would be," Xavier agreed, "just as I am proud of you every single day." Adelaide leaned her head on Xavier's shoulder. "We have been blessed, you and I. We have indeed." As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for over 3 decades, Adelaide thought back to that terrifying day when she had been alone and freezing, certain she was going to die. She thought about the sound of hoofbeats through the snow, the sight of a stranger offering rescue. She thought about how Xavier had not just saved her that day, but had given her a reason to live. Had shown her that endings could become beginnings, that loss could be followed by love, that even in the darkest moments, hope could ride through the storm. "Come with me," he had said. And she had, and it had made all the difference. Years later, after Xavier passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Adelaide would tell her grandchildren the story of how she and their grandfather had met. She would describe the blizzard, the cold, the moment when she thought her life was over. And then she would describe how Xavier had appeared like an answer to a prayer, how he had wrapped her in his coat and carried her to safety, how he had been patient and kind, and had waited for her heart to heal before offering his own. "True love," she would tell them, "is not just passion and romance. It is also rescue and patience and choosing each other every single day. Your grandfather saved my life, yes. But more than that, he gave me a new one. He gave me all of you, and that is the greatest gift anyone could ever receive." Adelaide lived for several more years after Xavier's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still active and involved in the ranch she had helped build. When she finally passed in her sleep at the age of 68, it was peacefully, with a smile on her face. They buried her next to Xavier on a hill overlooking the Circle O, where they could watch over the land and the family they had created together. And if you visited their graves on a quiet evening, you might almost hear the wind whispering those 3 words that had changed everything, that had turned death into life and loneliness into love. "Come with me." The Circle O Ranch continued through the generations, passed down to Thomas, and eventually to his children and grandchildren. The story of how Xavier and Adelaide had met became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and that the courage to accept help when it is offered can lead to a lifetime of happiness. The ranch house still stands, expanded and modernized over the years, but with the original structure at its heart. And on the mantel in what was once Xavier and Adelaide's bedroom, now preserved as a sort of family museum, sits a photograph taken on their 10th wedding anniversary. In it, Xavier and Adelaide stand together, his arm around her waist, her head leaning slightly toward him. They are smiling, genuinely happy, 2 people who had found each other in the midst of a storm and had chosen to build a life together. Below the photograph, in Adelaide's own handwriting, is a small card that reads, December 1883. He rode through the snow and said, "Come with me." I went. Everything after was blessing, and indeed it was. From the cold and desperation of that winter day had sprung warmth and love and family and legacy. Adelaide had been saved from freezing to death, but more than that, she had been saved for a life worth living. Xavier had offered rescue, but what he had really offered was partnership, love, and the chance to build something beautiful together. Their story became a testament to the resilience of the human heart, to the power of second chances, to the truth that sometimes the darkest moments precede the most beautiful beginnings. Adelaide had faced death alone in a frozen cabin, and Xavier had ridden through a blizzard to save her. But what came after the rescue was what truly mattered. The choice to trust, to love again, to build a future together despite past losses and present uncertainties. In the end, it was not just a story of survival. It was a story of love, deep and true and lasting. The kind of love that starts with 3 simple words and grows into a lifetime of shared moments, shared struggles, shared joys. The kind of love that creates family and legacy and memories that endure long after the original lovers are gone. "Come with me," Xavier had said. And Adelaide had taken his hand and stepped into a new life, a better life, a life filled with love and purpose and meaning. And together, they had built something that would last far beyond their own years, a testament to the power of choosing hope over despair, love over loneliness, and life over death. The blizzard that almost killed Adelaide had instead become the catalyst for the greatest blessing of her life. And every person who came after, every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who bore the Olson name, was a part of that legacy, a part of the beautiful story that began with a widow freezing alone in her cabin and a cowboy who rode through the snow to save her.